Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Commonwealth Club is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to the civil discussion of important issues of the day. Any opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not of the Commonwealth Club. If you're watching us live on YouTube, use the chat box to submit questions for our special guests today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Miao, the producer and host of The Michelle Miao Show and a member of the Commonwealth Club's Board of Governors. Good to see you again, Michelle.
Great to see you, John, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Our program today is from Women from Her to Here. It's actually an exhibit that's happening right now at the Chinese Culture Center in San Francisco, and it's happening through August 28th. So you have a chance to go out there right now if you're in the Bay Area to go check out this exhibit that explores artwork focused on the Asian diaspora, gender diversity, and sexual equality. And so our panel today and here to discuss the exhibit is Hee-Soo Kwon, who's a visual artist and anthropologist from South Korea, Hoi Leung, who's the curator at the Chinese Culture Center, Madeline Lim, who's founding executive and artistic director of Queer Women of Color Media Arts Project, otherwise known as QuackMap, and Nicole Pun, who's a visual artist from Hong Kong, and finally, Titi Takamoto, who's an artist and filmmaker, and so much more. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us this afternoon and for allowing me to be with you all. Like I said, I'm so super excited. I think the first question would be good for our artists today, or not just our artists, but our audience today, is getting to know us a little bit deeper. I talk a lot about how diverse our communities are, not just the LGBTQIA plus community, but also even in our Asian American communities. And so if we can all go around and just tell everyone how you identify. I can go first. I'm Michelle Miao, and I identify at times as gender nonconforming, as queer, and as lesbian. My family are immigrants from Laos, and here I am in San Francisco at the Commonwealth Club. Hoi.
Hello, everyone. I identify as queer. I'm a 1.5 gen. That means I came to the US when I was a kid, and I came from Hong Kong.
Titi?
Hi, so I go by Titi, mostly on Zoom. I use they, them pronouns. I'm fourth generation Japanese American, and I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Hee-Soo?
Hi, I'm Hee-Soo Kwon, and I go by she, her, and I'm from South Korea, and it's been like 3 years or 4 years since I moved to the US. And I'm based in the Bay Area.
Madeline.
Hi, everyone. I am Madeline Lim. I identify as queer, lesbian, gender non-binary, and I am an immigrant. I am originally from Singapore. I was born and raised there, and I left and came to the United States when I was 23. And I'm based in San Francisco.
And Nicole.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole. I identify as queer and lesbian, so I use she, her as my pronoun. So now I'm based in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Let's begin with Hoi. So Hoi, there is an erotic wallpaper by a transgender Taiwanese artist, Yao Hong. Why don't we start with, talking about putting this together and the importance of bringing this exhibit to the Chinese Culture Center?
Yeah, and I think it's really important that this exhibition speaks to everyone, but at the same time speaking to specific audiences that CCC has, which are Asian American, trans and queer, immigrants, Asian within the Asian diaspora. So I want an exhibition that can do all these things while taking very specific stories and narratives from local communities, from San Francisco all the way down to this micro neighborhood Chinatown, right? And then pairing these narratives with in different stories across the Asian diaspora. And so I thought it was fitting to put Yao Hong's wallpaper right up front because it is about an artist's personal journey of drawing and dealing with personal anxieties, but also contemplating on the anxieties of being a Taiwanese person in contemporary time, a young Taiwanese person. And so it's kind of these sort of in-betweenness that all of us feel all the time. I think that speaks to the community members that come to the Chinese Culture Center and how queerness can become an entry point to sort of unpack all of these very complicated things. And so that's really the inspiration for this exhibition.
And just quickly, you're putting together this exhibit, and obviously we've been through this pandemic. Things are starting to shift and change a little bit. People are kind of going out there and exploring, but things are also different in San Francisco. What we used to be, this hub for international travel, we're now focused more on local tourism. Just curious how the art has been absorbed, whether internationally through virtual programs that you've hosted, or simply by people now starting to walk in.
Yeah, I think in 2020, maybe I'll throw this out there, everyone became more queer because nothing was normal, and I think for me, I want to make something relevant to everybody's feeling at time. And this is something that queer folks go through all the time, and so to extend this into the mainstream and to extend this narrative and dialogue, I think it's very befitting for this weird times that is 2020. But then in the show, there is moments where it's about sort of epidemics and pandemics. It's about loss, it's about hope. And so those themes do come through, and it strikes people differently at this time as well.
Well, thank you. Again, I'm so excited, and I'm excited for the exhibit. I had the privilege of going, and so if you haven't been there, please go down and check it out and, become a little bit more queer, or a lot more if you are already at the max. Madeline, it's such an honor, to have you here on the panel, to have you on the program, but also, of course, in any, artwork that we talk about that includes LGBTQIA plus identities. I mean, you're a pioneer here in the Bay Area and bring our stories forward in a visual way. And so I want to catch up, actually. A lot has happened for you. And, that big thing about your film, which Sambal Belacan was, banned from Singapore for 22 years. And then in October, it was given a one-time, exception to be screened again. And so tell us all about it. I mean, was this vindication? Was it emotional? What was going on? What was that like?
Hey, Michelle. First of all, I just want to thank you and Hoy for having me here on the panel. And I am delighted to be speaking with you again. I missed you. The last time we talked was, on camera May last year. So thank you for having me. Let's see. Wow. Yes, it has been a year for my film Sambal Belacan in San Francisco. As you mentioned, it was created 24 years ago in 1997. And when I completed the film, I really wanted it to screen in Singapore back then. And the next year, in 1998, the Singapore International Film Festival approached me and said, hey, we want to screen your film, and, would that be cool? And I said, sure. I knew they had to run it through the Singapore Censorship Board. And I said, okay, well, let me know what happens. The Singapore Censorship Board sat on it until after the festival was over. And then they sent a fax that had a stamp on it that said banned in Singapore. And so, of course, I was really upset because I really, really wanted it to screen in Singapore, which is my home, right? And, but, I had a lot of filmmaker friends that were like, look, it's 1998. What filmmaker film gets banned anymore in any country? You have to wear this as a badge of honor. And so, I sort of just took that. The following year, we tried again. They submitted the film to the Singapore government, and again, it was banned and rejected. So after that point, I was just like, okay, it's never, ever going to screen in Singapore. That's okay. I made my peace with it. It screened, around the world at a lot of different types of film festivals. And then last year in August, the Singapore International Film Festival approached me again and said, we really want to screen your film as part of this year's film festival, but it's going to be in a pre-festival program called New Waves. What do you think? And I'm like, okay, well, after you find out from the government, let me know, right? So again, we went through this whole thing, and then, and they had more ambitious plans. They wanted it in the pre-program. They wanted it as part of the actual International Film Festival, which was in November, December. And then they had hopes to put it online, to screen online. So a few months later, we had a discussion, and it was like, well, we can screen it for the New Waves program. And it was going to be an in-person program, COVID protocol observed, to 33 people in person. And I said, okay, great. And I said, well, is it going to screen, for all the other screenings that you mentioned? It's like, no, the government gave us a really hard time, and, all the red tape that they had to go through to get the clearance. And I had thought the ban was lifted. And they said, no, in fact, the ban had not been lifted. The government made a one-time exception to the ban for this one screening, and any other screening would have to go through the entire process all over again. And I was like, okay. And I didn't want to be the filmmaker giving them a hard time, and it's like, okay, whatever's going on, that's fine. And they said, yes, we want to do a Q&A with you. And, but here's a memo from the government, and you can't talk about, LGBTQ campaign. You can't talk about LGBTQ issues, but you can talk about, being an LGBTQ person. And I was like, do they know I started an organization called Queer Women of Color Media Arts Project? It was all very, so I was like, okay, I won't mention any of these things. So anyhow, we recorded the Q&A. The Q&A has not been released at all. The Q&A with all the other filmmakers got released, but the Q&A with me did not get released. So anyhow, that was just a little bit of the drama and the background to that. So it still remains banned. And, back then it was the late 90s. Now it's the 21st century. I mean, this is 2021. There's the internet, there's YouTube, there's, LGBTQ, anything everywhere. I mean, I could put Samba Belacan in San Francisco on YouTube, but, it's like, yeah.
But we can see the film at CCC, right?
Yes, absolutely. You can see the film at CCC. Yes.
And lucky us. So, but I mean, explain to us though. It's a little bit of a conundrum because it's not like LGBTQI films are not being screened in Singapore. So I personally don't understand, why your film, which is a film about three Asian lesbians or three Singaporean lesbians who are in the United States now, and they miss home. I mean, what could be so bad about a film, about your film?
Exactly. My thoughts exactly. And back in 98, when they approached me to screen my film, they were screening Fire, Happy Together by Wong Kar-wai. They screened two other feature-length gay films, one from Canada and one from the UK. So they were screening all of these films, and they banned my 25-minute documentary, But I really think that it has to do with the fact that it deals with not just sexuality, but it also deals with racism in Singapore and nationality, right? And so, sexuality is a no-no. Racism is an even bigger no-no. And I remember when I was editing my film, I spent about 2 weeks really thinking about this one edit. DP, one of the portraits in the documentary, talks about racism, and I wanted to pair that with National Day footage, and the Prime Minister making speeches and things like that. And I knew if I did that, there was no way that my film would screen in Singapore. And I really sat with like, okay, do I do some self-censorship here in terms of, like curbing my own creativity and say, all right, I'm going to not make that edit, hoping that it'll screen in Singapore. And then what happens if it doesn't screen in Singapore, right? So, I really, sort of struggled over it for 2 weeks. And then finally I just have to be true to my vision. And so I made those edits and yes, this is where we are.
Do you feel targeted?
It's very interesting. It's mixed. On some level, yes. On some level, no. It's part of the reason I left Singapore, and I had been as a teenager I was doing underground LGBTQ organizing, which was illegal back then. And the government started arresting people who were doing organizing, and it just got a little too close to home and started to get too hot. And that was when I left. And I've spoken with other activists and organizers, LGBTQ activists in Singapore, and they said, well, if you didn't leave back then, which was the late 80s, you definitely would have been arrested in the 90s, you know? And so it's sort of this struggle and this edge that is constant, right? And, you know, I really wanted the documentary to be multi-layered in that sense, because our experiences here in the US as immigrants, as queers, as Asians, as, you know, people of color, it's not, we are not a single issue people, you know what I mean? And so I really wanted the documentary to reflect that artistically. Like, there are scripted scenes in there, there are interviews, there's newsreel footage, you know, there's poetry. And I really wanted those to be woven together to really reflect that multi-layered experiences that we live every day.
So important. And again, you can see the short film at the CCC. So hopefully you will go check it out, because you can't see it in Singapore. TT, I wanted to, you know, we were talking about the importance of sharing AAPI stories, and I mean, Asian queer stories, to be honest with you. And there's still so many that are left untold. And I feel like what you've done is taken a story about the first Chinese American doctor and uncovered different, you know, facets of this person's life for the general public to know more of. Talk to us about how you came across Margaret Chung and the story of Margaret Chung, and then, you know, telling the story in a different way, not just in this old-fashioned, you know, documentary type format.
Sure, yeah. So I first heard about Margaret Chung from my partner, Amy Sueyoshi, who is a queer historian. And she told me this story about Margaret Chung driving around with, you know, fancy cars in San Francisco, and always had some hot starlet on her arm, you know, typically white starlet. So she had a long-term relationship with Sophie Tucker, but she was also often featured in the newspaper at, you know, Margaret Chung seen at such and such restaurant with so-and-so movie star. So in that way, she was quite out about town, but at the same time, she was also somewhat closeted. So when she wrote her own memoir, she took out any traces of her queerness, because she really thought about her public image in a particular way. She was also really involved with the military. She wanted to be a pilot. She loved aviation. So she's just this extraordinary person. And I thought, oh, it'd be great to make a experimental film about her, because I was thinking about how she wanted to fly through the air, but, you know, in her own surgery practice, she was actually delving into the body and sort of diving through the body. And, you know, I also thought of her as this kind of like having a butch bedside manner, because when she was in college, she went by Mike and she wore masculine clothing. And so I was just thinking about these like hot scenes of you know, butchness. And then as I did more and more research about her story just became more complicated. So she was buddies and maybe lovers with Virginia Hill, who was Bugsy Siegel's ex-girlfriend. And Margaret Chung traveled a lot with Virginia Hill, and they probably moved money and maybe drugs together. So her story just got super complicated, and I was trying to think, how do I capture the feeling of Margaret Chung as someone who was able to be queer in white circles, and yet not totally accepted because she was Asian, and then was really important to the Asian American and particularly the Chinatown community, but was somewhat closeted within those circles. So I got the sense that she was someone who always wanted more, but never got exactly what she wanted. So I structured the film almost like a drug high, like it's something that it escalates and escalates and then kind of comes crashing down and then starts over again. So it's a looping film that's trying to capture that sensibility.
Have you gotten, responses from folks who didn't know about Margaret Chung or knew, but maybe not all of the different, parts of her lives, especially the queer part?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some important publications about Margaret Chung and her queerness. So I think that's pretty well known by now. And so, in Asian American Heritage Month and Queer Month, she's being celebrated quite a bit. I think it's the darker side of her history, her involvement with Vice and San Francisco politics and those sorts of things. That's the part that is not talked about as much. And that's a part that both initially worried me, but then also in the end made me feel more empathetic towards her as someone who's really, really complicated.
Thank you so much. Hisu, I had read a piece or an article, and there was a quote or a response from someone who had described your art as strange, but, strange is brilliant. And so, I got the experience of your art piece at CCC, and I think there's a lot to explain there. There's a whole lot of textures, and it's not just, 3D visuals, but you are creating an entire feminist utopia. So talk to us about, what exactly that is. And I'm going to say it wrong, but how you incorporate Lemusism?
Lemusism.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I initiated an autobiographical feminist religion, Lemusism, in 2017 when I was a second year MFA at UC Berkeley. And basically, I'm continuing two different practices related to Lemusism. Like, I have a community based in the Bay Area, and many people are we are now spreading all over the world. But there are more than 100 people who converted to Lemusism. So sometimes I do some group performances or installation with them. Basically, I'm helping them to initiate their own autobiographical feminist religion. So that's my communal practice about Lemusism. And my personal part is I 3D modeled my ancestors, female ancestors whom I lived with together. So I made my great grandmas and my grandma from mother's side and father's side, and my mom and me, and Lemusism itself. So I have 6 of 3D rendered Lemusism characters. So my feminist utopia is I want to merge my utopian dream, where my ancestors and my community member and myself and future audiences or believers can get along together, in digital space without any limit of time and spaces. And also and I use the digital space as some kind of where I built the utopia. So the piece I have in the CCC gallery is part of it. I 3D scanned and I made some 3D models of the gallery and the neighborhood of the Chinatown in San Francisco, and transformed it as some kind of utopian world where my ancestors and I are hanging out together. Yeah. And the second video, next to the main wall, is basically it's all about my mom. I made special video for her, honoring her, because I have really very special memories related to this neighborhood. 2 years ago, I had a solo exhibition around this neighborhood. There is a gallery called Et al. Chinatown, and when I was preparing for the show, I got and it was about my mom and my whole family's metamorphosis, molting the human skin and getting the snake kind of skin, so becoming Lemusism. And when I was working on that, I had a news that my mom got cancer. So but I had all the schedule packed, and I couldn't go back to Korea, and it was really hectic time, and I miss my mom and family so much. And I was like watching the video of my mom like molting and getting the new body, but my mom is in Korea and she's sick, so I was like really kind of out of mind. But at the time, like when I was like walking around the neighborhood in Chinatown, and like whenever I meet some people like in the same building with the gallery, they were so nice, and they remind me of my family. So and it's my second time to work on the neighborhood around this area after that. So I had some idea like, oh, I want to transform this neighborhood, like whole neighborhood, to my digital utopia, so that like I can see it and archive it as part of my universe. So, yeah.
So the part about, including your ancestors, was this also research that you had to do through family members?
Yeah, so I feel like my family history is quite interesting, because there were 4 generations of female, and we lived together. My grandma from father's side, and grandma from father's side, and my mom, and me and my sister. And my dad was out of town often, so there were like women's like community kind of feeling. Yeah. So I heard a lot of interesting family history from them, and also like literally like spent a lot of time together with them. And I could get some great amount of photos or like home videos from my parents. So I analyzed and I studied all the resources, and like tried to study their face or their like fashion, or what they were what they like when they were like young, like something like that. So that kind of materials were kind of reference for me to give them second life as 3D avatar in my utopia.
Thank you so much. And Nicole, thanks again for being with us. I know that you're in Hong Kong, so it's 3:30 in the morning there. But like, okay, this is exactly how I felt when I saw your artwork at the exhibit, for the first time. I started giggling like, the first time coming out, because the images, the portraits of, the hand gestures, they're very familiar to me. They're intimate. It's intimate for lesbian, queer, people. And so let's talk about, your artwork and these portraits. It's not of the face, it's of, again, like I mentioned, hand gestures, but I guess sexual, right?
Yes. So over the past few years, I interviewed American, Taiwanese, and Hong Kong lesbian to learn more about the stories of their hands. So hand for most of the people are like machine of their bodies, but for lesbian, they are quite intimate. Their hands have deeper and more personal meaning. So I invite individuals to perform in front of my lenses how they touch and make love to their partners. So the photograph are not only the portraits, but also projection of lesbian desires.
What gave you, I guess, the inspiration? I feel like sometimes we get stereotyped, we as in, Asian queer people get stereotyped as quiet or sometimes silent on, especially being honest about our sexuality. And so I was wondering if part of this was, being radical in that way.
I think being like an Asian or like somebody from Hong Kong, like when I was studying in Cal Arts, I feel kind of isolated. So sex is not something that we talk about very often in Hong Kong or in any Chinese society. So I feel kind of a little bit isolated. So I look back to Hong Kong history, like LGBT history in Hong Kong. And under the influence of the British colonial rule, Hong Kong actually has the UK sodomy law, which the law used to criminalize sex between men and between heterosexuals. So there's no equivalent restriction on lesbian sex. So that's how I began the project, like how do lesbians engage in sexual intimacy. So that's the starting point of why I want to explore sexuality through my photograph.
What's been the most common response to the portraits, the series?
You mean in Hong Kong or in the US?
Oh, you know what? Actually, thanks for bringing up that point. How about both? We can start with Hong Kong.
So in Hong Kong, it's very different. When I show my work in the US, the group show, people actually identify them very easily. Somebody walk by and say, wow, that's like hand point, that's the gesture, that. So they're not like shy at all. People are very upfront to talk about it. But in Hong Kong, it's quite difficult. Even when I'm showing it in a small gallery in more like a community setting, I have to have like a veil, like between the public side of the gallery space and the private side, because it's actually, there's a lot of school tour coming in and out. So there's like a veil between the artwork and the public area. Like, people kind of understand the sign, the language, but at the same time, very difficult to talk about it in like language, So yeah, when I have like conversation with the public audience, actually they are willing to know the process, the creative process, but at the same time, they are quite difficult to understand what it means, or like to experience it, or to have more language when it comes to sexuality. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Probably exactly what you're picking up from even myself. And I mean, I want to talk about it, very deeply, but probably more intimately. And maybe that's just part of me. But here's a question for all of you. I feel like art is a great way for us to tell our stories, and especially, folks in the AAPI queer community. And so I wanted to know if the art came first for you in order to tell stories or tell more stories, or if, you know what I mean? Like, as far as like your journey, if art was a way for expressing you first before you came out or identified yourself, or it was the other way around, where the identity came first and then art was a way to embrace yourself. We'll start with Hoi.
Great. I was hoping to learn more from the artists on this question.
Okay.
I suppose I can go. Yeah, no, it's for me, I think what art means to me is being able to tell my stories on my own terms. And I think given the massiveness of the structure that are shaped around us to prevent us from doing that, one of the most powerful things we have is our voice. And then the arts, perhaps it's not a tool, but almost like an expanded tool. It helps you become better, so it's definitely like a tug and pull. I think the identity and the art fight all the time, let alone the pre-existing structure that confines all of us. But I love the fight between me and the art, because that is the real problem that I want to deal with, not everything else. So I think that's my perspective on it.
Madeline.
Sure. I think that's so interesting that for Hoi, it's this fight. I think for me, I knew I was queer when I was 7 or 8. And I think a few years after that, I knew I wanted to be an artist. And part of my wanting to be an artist as a very young person was questioning all of the structures of society, right? It's like, why do women behave this way? Why do men get to behave that way? Why do men get to make these decisions? And, and then when my sexuality came into that, it's like, well, if I like girls? What does that mean about me, right? Like what label gets put on me? So it was really questioning all of the ways that we get socialized as people, et cetera. And so it just happened to, my art form just happened to be film. Like film was the thing that spoke to me. You know, it was the light, the color, the texture that really stood out to me. And I remember, I think later on when I was 18 and I was supposed to be studying for this exam, the library had just received these huge catalog of art books. And I spent weeks looking at the art books and not studying my exams. But anyways, so I think for me, it's more this weaving together of all of the different parts of who I am, right? Like the being queer, being an artist, and in this case, you know, film and understanding the world. And just to say that for Sambal Belacan in San Francisco, I really wanted to put faces to an issue, because very often when we talk about immigration, especially in the United States, and we're talking about people who may be undocumented, it becomes a very contentious political issue, and, you know, the wall at the border and all these things. And I just really wanted to put faces to the issue and have people listen to very intimate conversations that were happening.
TT?
Such a great question. So I think I came into the arts before I came into queerness, and it was really in grad school. I was actually surrounded by, you know, out and proud queer artists, mentors, faculty members. It was one of probably the queerest MFA programs at the time, and so much of the connections that I made, but also the artwork that I loved and continue to love is queer, queer in its strategies and its tactics. And I think my work was probably queer before I came out as queer to myself, if that makes sense. So, you know, especially in relation to performance work or experimental work, I think there is a kind of queer poetics that allows you to express certain things while expressing other things at the same time. So there's this kind of coding where you're expressing things that might make sense to a really small group of friends or individuals. But then to the public, it might look like you're just talking about numbers, or, you know, you're talking about something else. So yeah. And then when I started teaching art history, realizing that, you know, art history is filled with queers. Like there's actually, art history is a history of queer art. And so just being part of that lineage has really, emboldened me to do more and more queer work.
I love that art history is queer history. Oh, so true. Hisu?
Yeah, actually, I started to make art as like doing some ritual for myself and family. I was majoring in business before, and like there is some turning point, but like I realized I just learned how to monetize myself and my body and my friend's body, and like utilizing it was just like abusing myself and like females' bodies. So, and I didn't have any critical like perspective about it, just learned it and like reproduced that kind of violence again. So after I realized that, like I wanted to educate myself, like, and at that time I learned about like feminist art and like other artists too. And so basically the starting point as a artist was like doing some ritual for me to release myself from the paradigm of thinking that what I learned through my whole life. And still, like I think for me, like making videos where the digital images were the 3D characters and working with the community members is all rituals for me and my ancestors and them. So like since I came to the US, since I started Lay Muslim Project, I'm questioning about everything I've learned and like kind of like unlearning everything and learning about everything again and again. And obviously, yeah, for sure, I want to identify myself right in different way. But for now, I'm going by she, her, because I want to be in line with my female ancestors first. So making like videos or games about them and like giving like different lives for them is like richer for them. And when I feel they become queer bodies, like through my art practice, then I feel like I'm ready to identify myself again. And that's kind of some kind of goal for me, like in this Lay Muslim practice.
Thank you. And Nicole?
So I come from a journalism background before I study art, and I like understanding how like people's human beings' behavior. So I kind of like talking to people and like writing interviews, like writing people's stories. So kind of art for me is something like expressing myself in not like a written way. So it's something very new for me. And when I study in KLAS, I have got in touch with queer faculty and queer artists, so I become more confident and to speak up and explore like the other side of me. But at the same time, I have a chance to explore the world with photography and writing. So that's something that is like a connection between me and the world.
Thank you all so much. And this is a question for any of you, if you feel comfortable sharing, but this program will end AAPI Heritage Month, and there's been so much discussion about being, Asian or Asian American with the rise in anti-Asian hate, racism, xenophobia. And so I wanted to ask if you would like to share, what it means to be AAPI, but also queer and also maybe American or not. Anyone want to kick us off? I'm going to pick on Madeline or Hoy.
Yeah, no, I think the reason why I believe in this show so much is that it's really about seeing each other's humanities. It's about empathy. It's about telling stories on our own terms. It just so happened it's about, it's from queer and feminist perspectives, with that being so much, it being a perspective where you can learn so much from. But I think the second we stop feeling things, that's where the issue is. And the second we start trying to box everyone in, I think that's where the issue is. So for me, when I put together the show, I want all the artists to be at the most cutting edge they can be, to be their fullest self, and that there is no shortcuts to any of the narratives that they're trying to express. And that for this exhibition to contain all of that, as a statement from, I guess, AAPI community that we are all of this. And so that's why I think it's very important for me to do this show. And and for me to continue to grapple with these feelings as we're seeing all the hate and violence that is happening in our communities.
Yeah, and I'm totally right there with Jorge. I think that it is very much about all our different facets, all our different stories, right? So for the exhibit at CCC, for example, you've got the different mediums, you have the different videos, numerous videos, so that, there's no way to it's part of deconstructing the stereotypes, right? So that you can't just, the public, whoever, can't just point the finger and say they are all like this one thing, right? It's like we are so many different things, and these are all the ways that we are that reflect authentic representations and authentic lives. And I think especially being Asian, we are cast as the perpetual foreigner in the United States, regardless of, it's one look, and we're instantly characterized and judged. And so I think that art is a really powerful and amazing way for us to show up and to not just to educate, but really just even for our own validation, so that we're not feeling isolated, we're not feeling alienated, because that's the purpose of bullying, right? All of the violence and the bullying is to make us feel like we don't belong here, like there's something wrong with us and we should disappear. And so I think that it's so important that we come together in community and show up in this way. So I just want to do a big shout out to CCC and to Hoy for putting on the exhibit. I think it's totally brilliant.
Anyone else want to add? And just reflecting and sharing out there to the world, what it means to us to be AAPI and queer. All right. I'll move on to the final question that I hope all of you will answer. And that is, I said earlier, there's so many stories we still need to tell that we want to tell in our AAPI queer community. And so what I'm also saying is that I hope you're working on a ton more stuff that we can go check out and follow you. Right now, what Hoy is probably going to say is come down to CCC because the exhibit runs through the 28th. And I don't know if Hoy is thinking about a future exhibit or working on other stuff, but I'll let Hoy answer that. So that's what we want to know. We want to know what other stories you would like to tell and what you might be working on in the future. TT?
Oh, okay. Well, right now I'm in what my friend calls the walkabout stage, where you just kind of like walk about in your brain looking for, and you walk about in the world and you try to figure out what the next project's going to be. I started thinking about Rosalie Bamberger, who was a Filipina American based in San Francisco, and she was the person who actually initiated the first meeting of lesbian couples that led to the formation of the Daughters of Bilitis. And her story is often not told, or, it's not featured prominently. So I'm just at the stage of looking in phone books and figuring out, what her profession was. She was a longtime paintbrush maker for Mork paintbrushes. So anyways, I'm thinking a lot about paintbrushes and brush making and bristles, and it seemed kind of hot to me right now, but I'm not, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet.
Yeah, I was going to say it probably takes a little bit more time for it to come together. But I was just going to ask the follow-up question if you thought that it would be in film form again. We're not sure yet, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, maybe, probably.
Yeah. Well, we can't wait. That's a great story. Hisu?
Yeah, so recently I published a new website project. It's called Hisu Leimusim Kwon, like Leimusim as middle name, and it's a digital archive of all the resources related to my memories about Leimussim. So I archived the resources I have from my family about the ancestors and also myself, some narratives and photos and like videos, and also some spaces related to Lei Museum. Like I did the 3D scanned like models of CCC or like the Lei Museum church I had before, like, and like my bedroom, like all the important places related to my work and like which I used for my videos before. So it's like endlessly evolving like digital universe, like library kind of concept. So whenever I conduct new ritual, like it'll be updated. Yeah, and so it's just published actually. Like I'm not sure it's part of a digital it's part of an online exhibition, but I'm not sure whether the institution published it yet. But like the the link is www.leimuseum.com, so you can explore it. And also when I was in Korea, like I made a video about the like honoring the victims of Atlanta shooting. Actually, like when I got the news, I was during the quarantine, like 2 weeks of quarantine, just arrived at Seoul, and it was really hard time for me to just like read the newspaper and like thinking about them. But yeah, I made some. To honor the victims, I made 3D models for the victims and like made some kind of like virtual ritual like by like me, and it's kind of like something like Korean shaman's ritual, like yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to add it. Yeah, you can see the video in my website too.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, so is that accessible to us? That's so great. But a quick follow-up to that is if you think you would add on more people to, your virtual world, aside from your ancestors, if that'll grow.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's the reason why I started with my female ancestors was because it takes so much energy and effort, and time. And like whenever I wanted to research about my female ancestors, I couldn't find any like documented resources about them. It's all about like just stories from my parents or something. So I just wanted to put more efforts for my female ancestors, and and the characters I made for the Lei Museum Sitkin project, like honoring the victims, it was my first time to make 3D characters for other people besides my family, and I'm totally open to like work more about it, and like I'm willing to invite other like practitioners or like other people who are interested in the museum and who are important for me. Yeah, definitely, and they will be archived in the universe too.
Could be like Lei Museum Pride in the future.
Yes,
thinking about pride.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, Nicole, some stories you might want to tell, or subjects you want to focus on, or some future work.
So right now, I'm organizing a small art space in Hong Kong called Sai Sai San. So it's kind of like a queer experimental space. So next week we are going to have a small screening, like a screening / sharing section. So it will be like a sharing section with some artists about like documentary work and about their queer work. So I'm very excited to have my own small space and help other artists to present their work as well. So it will be another arts project for me to connect with other artists and also the queer community in Hong Kong.
Thank you. Madeline.
Coming up, I am currently working on my first feature-length documentary about Jewel Gomez, who is an award-winning author and playwright, and her seminary novel, Lambda award-winning novel called The Gilda Stories, which was written in the late 80s and published in the early 90s. So the documentary is about her and her art and her activism and her life and her legacy. So that is in post-production right now, and hoping to get it completed by the end of this year. We were supposed to do a little bit of filming last March, and then of course the pandemic hit, but now everyone's fully vaccinated. So it's back on that train. And of course, in 2 weeks' time, the Queer Women of Color Film Festival is happening. So there's that. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the film festival and, some films you might be excited for?
Absolutely. Our festival focus this year is Molten Connections because, after a year of, physical distancing and, sheltering in place and, we really feel the need to connect. And even though it will still be a virtual film festival, it's really about connection. We are very excited about a new film by Narissa Lee about San Francisco. And it's about, basically QT BIPOC folks, queer and trans people of color in San Francisco dealing with gentrification and displacement. Very excited about that film. It's world premiering. And we have 19 other films. They're all amazing. Come join us. It's free. And then I think the Asian Art Museum is actually screening 2 of my films, Samba Belacan in San Francisco, as well as The Worlds of Bernice Bing in June.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Hoy, yeah, that's right. There's an incredible exhibit going on until the 28th. I know that's what you're busy working on, but, tell us maybe a little bit more. We shared work from 4 artists here today, but there are more. And then you could also share with us maybe some thoughts on future exhibits.
Yeah, so I welcome, everyone to come to Chinatown and to visit the Chinese Culture Center, as well as 41 Ross, where CCC and QuantMap has collaborated on an incredible youth film program. It's a experimental storefront. You can walk through the alleyway and check out some really amazing film made by queer and trans API filmmakers. And of course, we have a lot of programmings coming up in June related to Pride Month celebration. We have some international conversations with Taiwanese curators and artists, as well as a screening of Shanghai Pride and a panel with the filmmakers. And on top of that, I think in essence of thinking about stories that I want to tell in the future, I think all my head is supporting the works of people who have lots of stories to tell and have not had the opportunity or the platform, reflecting on how grateful I am to be able to produce work and feel supported. I want to do the same. So, follow CCC's work. We have a lot going on in supporting spaces, programmings, opportunities for artists to work at the intersection of supporting community, social justice, and also creating their most creative works.
That's awesome. We actually have time for one very last question, and it just came in. So I really want to ask this because it's a great point. And so it could be just one or two of you if you'd like to answer. And that is, do you feel that this is an exciting time for queer API folks, to share our stories and breaking barriers, especially cultural barriers?
Yes, 100% yes.
I was going to say, I do. I'm here. And, I'm as queer as can be and Asian, and usually in spaces in which many people are not. And so I'm very proud of that. But also curious to hear, TT, what do you think? An exciting time to really be out there telling our stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with, amazing curators like Hoy, and also just amazing folks like you, Michelle, just, willing to gather us together. So we're not the only one in the room, but, that there can be lots of us in an exhibition or on a Zoom screen together. I think it's really exciting. And I'm also really excited about how CCC has collaborated with SF Pride and did Chinatown Pride, and that those 2 months are kind of merging and coming together. Pride Month and Asian American Heritage Month are coming together in San Francisco a lot more fluidly. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, from closeted to coming together, right? In our history. Hisu, or Nicole have some thoughts, especially because your artwork, transforms throughout, I guess, different countries. So not just focused on diaspora here in America, but also from homeland.
I think it's very interesting time for us to be there and to make some noise and see how things are in the world. So even though it's not the best time, but at the same time, it would be our best time to create and to speak up and to make something experimental, just create something new and fun in this world where we have to sit behind the screen and then all they work from home, like desk job. I mean, like computer work from home all the time. So it's kind of like an interesting time to create something fun and experimental in a queer way. So always a good time, I think.
It's always a good time, and that's great. Hisu, anything to add before we end the program?
Oh yeah, I feel like it was really like interesting time for me too. Like I feel as Hui talked about it before, it's like there's nothing like normal from last year, and like I feel like because of COVID, I could experience different kind of community, like different kind of intimacy between people. I mean, like even though we are far away, I could build up like a totally different kind of friendship with many other artists and curators, or like people all over the world. So I appreciate that, and I think it's really strange but interesting time to explore each other's work together.
Well, thank you so much, all of you. You are incredible. Thank you for your artwork and all you do for our communities. And so everyone out there, thanks for joining us. And please support the work of our artists here, Hisu Kwon, Nicole Pun, Madeline Lim, and Tichi Takamoto, and of course, Hui Leung, who has curated an amazing exhibit. So I'll welcome John Zipper back from the Commonwealth Club to send us away.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you again to our special guests on this Michelle Meow Show at the Commonwealth Club of California. And thanks to all of you for watching or listening to this program. Feel free to share this video and podcast with your friends, family, and others in your network. And you can find more programs at commonwealthclub.org/MMS. Stay safe and have a good weekend. Goodbye.